All right, Sarah and Megan, can you hear us? All right, great. I will start us off this evening, and it is 7, so we will get things moving. Welcome to our Zoom audience as well as our in-person audience. I think we have the biggest in-person audience we've had in a few years, so it's good to see everyone in person. So welcome. Tonight we are doing our second forum. We have a relatively short presentation just to kind of go through the various asks, and then we will open it up for questions afterwards. If you are on the Zoom, I will ask that people use the raise hand function so that we know who wants to ask a question. And then if you are in person, I will ask you to just come up to the little desk that we've got here. You won't be on camera, but the speaker that's right there in front of us will pick you up in what you have to ask so that everybody can hear you. I'm going to share my screen. I will ask that people keep their questions until the end after we go through the whole presentation. So welcome. As I said, this is our second forum for question 2 and as an informational session. So one of the questions that we routinely have been getting is, why do we need this funding now? So our answer to that is pretty simple, that these are immediate ongoing needs that our schools have been deferring for quite some time at this point. And so if we continue to defer those, the items on this list are only going to continue to get more expensive as they have over recent years. These needs will not go away, and not meeting them directly impacts our students, teachers, and staff. We risk falling behind in meeting some of the standards and the needs that our students have, as well as I mentioned, these deferred expenses will just become more expensive as time goes past.
So as we developed the FY23 budget, we started the process with our Planning for Success, which is our strategic plan for the district. And it has the 5 pillars that you see there: teaching and learning, professional culture, diversity, equity, and inclusion, technology, and facilities and operations. And so all aspects of the FY23 ask are connected to our strategic plan. And so the teaching and learning has the curriculum, materials, supplies, personnel. Professional culture attends to the needs of our staff. Certainly the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece that I'll talk to more in a little bit. Significant investments in technology, and then our capital requests through facilities and operations.
So what are we asking for? So these are the various buckets that have been identified and kind of organize our asks. The first one that you'll see, and there are one-time asks as well as recurring asks. So the first one that you see is safety. This ask has security camera replacements and new installations at schools that do not have them, swipe card access for doors at the high school, secure entry doors, a monitor, like an actual human being monitor, and a visitor ID system at the high school, as well as replacement of radios that have been defined as needs for years at this point. Next is technology. Much of our technology request is in the town capital request of question 1, but these additional requests right here are for software needs throughout the district, as well as tech equipment at Village School. So personnel, as you can see, is one of our much larger asks. There are quite a few pieces within this personnel ask. And as you see from looking at that slide, these are not requests for additional classroom teachers, which has been confusing for some. These personnel positions are for staff that have been cut by previous administrations and positions that have become imperative within the past few years due to developing needs in providing an exemplary education. As with the other requests, they are directly related to the priorities outlined in the strategic plan for success.
So one of the questions that I have been presented with is, why do we need a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And this is actually an area where we are behind. In Marblehead, a number of districts have this position in existence, and many more are adding it. I hearken back to David during the pandemic, who said Marblehead should be a leader in different spheres of returning to in-person education. And this is where I think that we are not leading. And so as superintendent, we have had a number of incidents over this year where students have been targeted on their race, their gender identity, their status. And it's deeply troubling to me as the superintendent to have a same-sex couple schedule an interview with me to know if enrolling their child in the Marblehead Public Schools would be safe for their family. It is concerning to me when I have a parent of a village student call me and say, my daughter is Jewish, is she safe at school? And so just as we support our educators in technology integration, we have a director of technology that assists. We support our special education students with a director of special education. The director of diversity, equity, and inclusion would be a student-facing position and would support classroom teachers in incorporating aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion and social emotional learning. Those aren't just stop, okay, we're going to do a diversity lesson now, but helping teachers, just as we have math specialists and literacy specialists that support our classroom educators. I really do see this as an integral part of supporting teachers as we look at new curricula, as we add classroom libraries and look at the materials that we use to make sure that all really does mean all in Marblehead.
So next up on that list is curriculum, which is another larger line in the budget asked. This is it targets all of the school buildings in our district. From STEAM carts and learning materials to engineering and science supplies across the district, the curriculum ask is broad and it appropriately addresses needs at every school. We're looking to replace science equipment at the vet school that has been used since before the middle school moved to its current location. Additionally, textbooks at the high school that don't include 9/11 and other current events or the past 2+ decades. My son, a freshman at the high school, actually, this is his textbook for social studies, and it was printed roundabouts when I graduated high school. So it's time that we.
And when was that?
1997. So now you can all do the math. Back in the olden days, if you ask him. So, it's time that we bring these things up to current events and really give our teachers and our students access to everything through their textbooks. Our youngest learners, additionally, will be able to access increasingly varied library resources. And that, again, these are needs and not wants. Here's a little bit more where those also will be going to. So if we go back up to that overview slide, tuition-free kindergarten is also on there. Most districts in Massachusetts do offer all-day kindergarten at no additional cost. Kindergarten is no longer an entry point to elementary school. Students are expected to finish kindergarten knowing how to read, and a full day is necessary to set our youngest learners up for success moving forward. It is an expectation to success, and so it shouldn't cost extra for parents or require parents to come and ask help from the district. Additionally, this line has been one that has been difficult to balance within our budget lines over the years. And so adding it fully into our operational budget would help to stabilize that line. Equipment and maintenance, these are all recurring costs that are being adjusted for yearly increases that are necessary and required for the service contracts that we currently carry. And then finally on that list is town benefits. Because of the personnel requests that we have, the town who takes care of our benefits for our staff was concerned that they would not have the ability to fund benefits for all of them. So that almost $500,000 is not going to the school department. So if question 2 passes, that will go straight to the town to cover benefits for employees, so that no one is running short on that. Finally, we have our capital requests. And as you see the lists there, there are also some of our capital requests in question 1, but these are additional ones that are being added into the operating budget. This will allow us to continue to address the overwhelming need for maintenance in our facilities, which has been a constant complaint that we hear from the community. We just completed a 20-year master plan for our facilities, and that started with the opening of the Brown School. We now need to continue to care for our buildings so that they last us long into the future, while we also then can provide for the needs of schooling in the 21st century. We have a comprehensive facilities assessment that was completed last year and is guiding the work for addressing the needs of our facilities. And these cost repairs are only going up. We have a roof in question 1, and that roof has gone up exponentially in price over the past few years. So again, we literally cannot afford not to address these maintenance needs. Finally, we have a slide devoted to the tax impact that people might be able to expect. So in the middle there, we looked from the tax assessor's office at the median single family home, which is assessed at $738,000 in Marblehead. And so that would mean that would go up, their taxes would go up an additional $310 a year. If you have $1 million home, it goes up a bit more, and $400,000 is less. So if you have questions about your property and the value of your property and what your exact tax impact would be, you can call the town assessor's office and they'll help you figure that out.
The average taxes for a home is $738. What's the percent increase that 310 represent over average?
So the question is, what's the percent increase? I think I've heard that. I've got Megan and Sarah on the Zoom. Do you guys remember that at all? What the percent increase is?
I don't have that right in front of me, but let's definitely follow up with that.
Yeah, that's a great question that we can find out.
Actually, I think I have the answer to that. So are you looking at the percent increase in your tax, or are you looking at our percent increase in the school budget from one year to the next?
So he's asking the $738,000. So if you had that median home price and it goes up that $310, what percentage increase for your taxes for that $738,000 home is that?
So I believe the tax levy is raising, again, we have to get you a finalized answer, but I want to say it was going to be around the 3% mark.
Do you know that for sure, or are you guessing?
I don't know that for sure.
So we'll get that information for you. It's a great question. Thank you.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about, from town meeting, the question about people that could not afford the tax increase. And so I've been working with Lisa Hooper at the Council on Aging, because Marblehead does have a tax abatement program. And so we've put in over a dozen opportunities for eligible seniors to come in and work in the various schools, doing everything from supporting literacy in the library to helping out in the front office, working at Widger Road, doing some scanning of documents in. And so Lisa has those, and people that are eligible and interested can explore those programs.
All right, so I will stop sharing for the moment and we will open it up for questions. Sorry about that. So I will call, I've got Nicole Cohen with her hand raised. So I'll go to Nicole first. Nicole, if you could state your address for the record as well, that'd be great.
Nicole Cohen, 40 Clifton Avenue.
Thank you.
Based on all available demographic information, Marblehead schools have a declining enrollment from a peak of 3,100 students to around 2,100 students in the next 4 years. Assuming that the schools will staff such that staff to student ratios are preserved at current levels, why isn't this far more than enough money to cover any increased cost the district is facing? Where is the breakdown of staff visa classroom teachers by grade, upper levels by subject matter, administrators, and central administration in the school buildings? Also, I would like to add that just because other school districts have a DI position does not mean that Marblehead needs a school-wide district program. Perhaps if we had kept our students in school, as the schools were known to be safe, we have kept them out of schools. It is no wonder that they are frustrated and acting up. You have not addressed the real problem or the real issue, which was your problem and inability to actually see the data and know that schools were the safest place for the students to be and for staff. Thank you.
Becky, you want to speak to the enrollment piece?
Yeah, this budget request has an eye to enrollment and maintaining class size. There will be future needs of the district, and we will likely not need to come back for a future ask. People have asked, why didn't we wait and go with the town if they're anticipating an override next year? I think we've articulated that the price, these are not things that are going to go away. They're just going to get more expensive. So we'll either pay for them now or we'll defer them and have additional needs that we'll have to pay for later.
And additionally, I will say, David, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow on to the, it's a good question about enrollment. We do have another member here of the Brown Building Committee. So back when we started the feasibility study, one of the first things that the Massachusetts School Building Authority challenged us with was, what's your enrollment going to be in 2022? And I think, Mr. Zisson remembers those days, and who can figure out what it's going to be? But the Massachusetts School Building Authority has a very exhaustive process that looks at, various cohorts. They look at birth rates, survivability. They look at new growth in the town. It's a proven methodology that they've used when they authorize reimbursement for school projects. So when we went into it 5 years ago, the previous administration said, we need 6 classrooms. We need 6 classrooms per grade at the Brown School. And when all was said and done, and the Massachusetts School Building Authority, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, said, no, you don't. You have declining enrollment. You need 5 classrooms per school. And the 5 classrooms will be suitable to meet your needs. And if you want to build any more than 5 classrooms, that will be not reasonable, and the town would need to move forward. So we went through a lot of that and followed up on that analysis. There was certainly a lot of debate with the building committee on, were these numbers going to, become reality? What happens if enrollment goes up? Well, the building was also designed in such a way that in the event we did experience, say, an enrollment increase 6-10 years from now, you could add on to the what is the pre-K and kindergarten wing to gain 4 more classrooms. That was another part of the design that was required. But, as far as enrollment goes, I think, not only the town, being the building committee and the school committee, we have been focused on enrollment at least for the last 5 years when we started to see the decline in enrollment. And I think the Brown School is a great example where we consolidated 3 schools. And while we have, a good 400 plus students that are enrolled at the Brown School, right? Dr. Bucky Glover's at about 350. And then when we do the forward look, it's looking like we're in a good place from staffing. So, that's one of the things that I think we have taken a hard look at and saved the town a lot of money where we don't have empty classrooms. The question as to, going forward and future, class size, that's something that I think the last 3 administrations have been very good at, where through teacher retirements and through attrition, we are using those monies to fund other areas where I think the finance committee and the town recognizes that if teachers retire and there's additional needs that we have where we won't have to have an ask, we can do that. But I think this year, the retirements are a little bit light, 5 to 7 people. But I think as we move forward over the next, 1 to 3, 4 years, that's something that I know Dr. Bucky, looks at to say, do we need to replace this teacher rather than pink slipping people? And, let's look at that as a way of balancing our budget going forward. That's just my general comment.
Do you want that follow-up question to that? Because that was very interesting.
Can you just come up so that the speaker can pick you out? And Sarah, I know that you can weigh in just a moment too.
So it looks like the Brown School and the Glover School was built with the idea around declining enrollment in the future. But obviously, this school predates that. So obviously, the high school predates that. If the number one priority of this is to put, to have all-day kindergarten, you stress how important it was to have all-day kindergarten. If this override doesn't pass, and it's only $375 to provide all-day kindergarten for the entire community, will this school committee and this superintendent make it a priority and have, with the declining enrollment of the retirement of 1 or 2 or 3 teachers, pay for all-day kindergarten with the existing budget we have?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something we would look at. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that's a priority, because I think a lot of people, when they hear the override, they hear, it's all-day kindergarten, but there's only 1/8 of the entire budget, it's only $375.
Mm-hmm.
So I think with the declining enrollment, a lot of people think, why can't we make this a priority regardless of a confrontational override? If the override doesn't pass, will people still be able to have a case for all-day kindergarten? So you guys are.
I would hesitate. We cannot make that commitment, and trust me, I am the demographic that would absolutely love that. I still have 2 more to go through full day kindergarten, so I see the value in it. I would love it, but there are many priorities in this budget that we have, and there are items of this that will need to be prioritized. For instance, safety, given what's going on in the world, particularly in the last few weeks, there could be a strong argument made and has been made at our safety meetings that needs to be prioritized for all of our students. So that's going to be a deeper conversation, because at the end of the day, if the override doesn't pass, these items then don't have a funding source. So we have to find a funding source, and there's only so many ways to do that. And you need to pull from another bucket. So I don't think that at this point, any of us are in a position to start telling, and I'm saying this just out of 100% sincerity. I do not want to lead anybody astray and say, yes, we will. We just don't have that. $325,000 is several teachers. We have, I don't have the number right up in front of me, but, several $100,000 in safety items that also, like I said, could be a priority. There are multiple items in here that really need to be dug into. And that is a larger conversation we will have to have with Fidelity, and we will do that. However, we cannot with any certainty let anybody walk away and say we will find that item guaranteed, because we have to have that larger conversation.
Can I just clarify there too, and just so the budget for next year, without the override, is set. So next year, we would go back and look at what's going on. We would go back and look at where our retirements are, and then fund things based on our current budget, like what that operating budget is. And then again, if there are additional asks, as there would be, because if we don't pass this year, but if we had that 375 that came up in the operating budget as extra for next year due to retirements, we could in theory fund all day K and then go in for the additional asks once again.
Makes sense. The number that shocks me is there's 247 graduated 247 kids just graduated. The current kindergarten enrollment is 147.
Right.
So if you look, there's not one class below 8th grade that has 200 kids, more than 200 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this is going to create a natural attrition of classroom teachers. And no one's gonna lose their job if people retire, age happens, and at the top of their, you said a couple of teachers, at the top of their earning years, they're making the max amount of money, that cost the taxpayers the max amount of money right before they retire. So
Yep.
2 or 3 teacher retirements would in essence completely fund all the kindergarten for the community. And I just don't know why it wasn't a priority prior to this override to begin with. It just makes a lot of sense.
Just
Based on the retirement, I do know there have not been many.
This
'Cause
year.
This year, I asked Michelle at the beginning of the process, who's our financial director, and she said there were none, maybe one.
We lost some during the pandemic for sure.
True.
We did lose some.
We lost some during the pandemic and we didn't have a lot of people, we had people who were paying. big
That
key-
money has already been reallocated though.
So I think,
For this year, it has, but then
So-
again, in subsequent years.
Yeah. so I would say, and it's also not like next year means like the next fiscal year, which is
Oh,
24.
yeah, oh.
Yeah.
25, no, that would be FY 25. We're talking about FY 20.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, yeah. Wow. I'm
Yeah.
like burning time here.
So just to-
Sarah, I do have that tax rate answer, if you want me to give that now.
Great.
It would be for our portion, of your tax increase, because every year, as we all know, there is an increase in our taxes, within the confines of Prop 2.5. For the portion that we are requesting for this override, it would be a 4% increase for anybody on their given tax bill from FY 22 to FY 23. So for instance, if your current tax bill is $8,000, which is a nice round average number that I think a lot of us pay, your tax bill would increase 320. So it would be for whatever your current tax bill is, it would be a 4% increase that would be attributed to our ask on question 2.
So it'd be a 4% tax increase on question 2, an additional tax increase on question 1 plus 2.5%.
Question 1 is not a Prop 2.5, it's a debt exclusion. Some of those are 5, some are 5, 10, and 20 years in that debt exclusion. So those will be rolling on and off at different times within that main frame of the debt exclusion. We also have the high school rolling off next year. So a lot of that where it rolls on and rolls off wound up coming out pretty fiscally neutral, if you will, because where one drops off, we're adding on in place of it.
So essentially, a previous temporary tax is going to expire, and then a new tax will take its place. So the people who voted for that original 2.5% or whatever override are going to, that temporary tax is going to not disappear because we're going to pass, if we pass question 1, that'll make up for the temporary tax for
True
teachers.
statement.
Am I saying this right? I'm kind of confused a little bit.
No, you're
No,
correct.
you're
Yep,
okay.
yep. And
So essentially, what would have happened if question 1 didn't pass was that the taxes would have gone down. We're doing a revenue neutral or an additional tax to make
Right.
up the difference. Then we're doing 4%, then we're doing 2.5%. I just want to make sure we're talking the same language.
The 2.5%, I'm unsure on.
The Prop 2.5.
Do you,
right?
David?
Right, for what the limit is, for what the limit is on Prop 2.5, but I think, you're perfectly right. So what Sarah was saying, thanks Sarah for that. So your current FY 22, it's $10.52 per thousand. So whoever's out there in the audience, you're paying $10.52 per thousand, you get your tax rate and the tax rate will be adjusted based on that rate. But the Article 1 is the impact is not only offset by expiring debt, but it's graduated debt. So in the example that the town administrator gave at town meeting, let's just say this, they have a plan to do the roadways over a period of time. That money is not all going to be spent next year. We want to replace the high school roof. The likelihood that we could bid it out and get the high school roof replaced and have it hit your tax bill next year, it won't happen. So that commitment for that money will happen over a period of years. And so it's hard to say, the total impact for next year until you figure out, okay, what roofs can be replaced, what road work can be done, but it's sort of a graduated commitment to fund it. And historically, we have a new town administrator and we'll be getting a new finance director, but historically with our AAA rating, Marblehead tries to keep their debt at 10% of the total budget. So that helps with our bond rating. So as Sarah was saying, debt rolls off, debt comes on, debt rolls off, debt comes on. And to have it at 10% has been a historically stable level so that people don't experience fluctuations in their tax rate is sort of the goal. And it helps with our bond rating too, to keep it at 10%.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
So I think what you're asking though is the Prop 2.5 that we do every year, right? Is that still going to happen?
It'll happen that following
Yeah.
year regardless. Yeah.
Well, right, but you're saying for next year.
Yes.
That was the, that's what you added in as the 2.5%.
So it'll be
Yes.
4% then the following year.
Oh, the following year. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought
Additional
you-
2.5%.
Got it. Yes.
It's a permanent tax levy, not
Right.
a,
Correct.
not a temporary debt exclusion where you
Right,
have
right, right.
$19 million for Lever School and then
Correct.
it's paid off, it drops back down, and the town could reallocate it like they did for a question one, but this
This is.
Right.
is forever.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions in our in-person audience? All right, Jonathan Lederman.
Thanks, Jonathan Lederman, Ida Road, Marblehead. I think that you probably need to spend more time on the declining population because it's really going to be huge money. I mean, we were talking about it back in the 2010s about how we anticipated drops, and the numbers are, I think, a lot more drastic. So it sounds like your buildings are sized properly, but the staffing level probably isn't. You probably have plenty of people that can retire and we won't even notice it in terms of class sizes. But the one thing I wanted to ask in question too, so you guys talk a lot about a 5-year plan and how you're doing a lot of planning. And I want to understand, this override has $800,000 of what are sort of described as one-time expenses, but because it's a general override, that $800,000 will basically be, received every single year. There'll be 800 this year, 800 plus 2.5% the next year, and so on. So in the next 2 to 5 years, years 2, 3, 4, and 5, what is your plan for that so-called one-time money in the out years? We know what you're doing with it this year. What's the plan for the next 4 years?
Sarah Fox, do you want to, I think you did a great job with the facilities piece on that.
Hi, thank you. So yes, they are one-time costs with the particular label of their line item for this year, but the need for that money will be rolled over each year to meet other one-time costs that we're trying to spread out strategically throughout, the life of our schools, which is, ongoing, obviously. One prime example of this is we have a very clear facilities strategic plan that carries us 10 years out. We had a professional assessment come in and really dig in deep with all of our buildings, all of our properties. And they actually produced to us a 20-year plan that showed exactly what we should be doing as far as capital investments every year for the next 20 years to keep our buildings at the level they're at. That doesn't include new initiatives like PV or anything sustainable or things like that. This is just to keep us at the level we're at. And when we really dug in, we dialed it back and looked at the first 10 years they gave us because we thought going out further from that, we really would want to not go a 10-year period without having our buildings reassessed again. So in that 10-year outlook, we produced a very comprehensive plan. And when you look at it, what you see is each year, there is a very heavy number that this professional organization is telling us we should be investing in our building. This was not a surprise. This is something we all knew. I'm sure, Jonathan, you know this from your years in the school committee. Every year we knew we needed to be investing in our buildings. But at the end of the day, when it came to investing in curriculum or other direct student needs, when we had a shortage of funding, we always had to put the direct student need first. So one of the biggest things we heard was, you're not maintaining your buildings. And why should we give you another building when you're not maintaining what you have? And we went out in the community 3 years ago, and the community really entrusted us with a tremendous investment, which was the largest capital investment the town's made into the Brown School. And what we did as a school department was we gave our word that we would maintain what we have. We would start with Fidelity approaching these renewals. And a big piece of that was this facilities master plan. So we know an outlook every year that we need, anywhere from the lowest, the bare lowest was 330,000, but most years it's around the $1 million mark that we should be investing in our buildings to keep them up to date and current. So what we'll be using a large portion of that for is things like, this year it's the high school roof. We know coming up soon, we have some major, I'm trying to pick out right now. I have the document in front of me just to give you an idea. Some of the bigger items in coming years are, redoing a parking lot at one point. Commercial gas-fired water heaters are due to be replaced. Various things like that. So we know that we are not running things to ruin, that we're maintaining. Another piece of this would be our curriculums. We know you don't buy a curriculum and it doesn't last forever. We had Go Math, I think, for 10 years. And so these one-time fees that we have embedded in this will allow us to update our curriculum as is appropriate to stay current and to make offering the best education we can to our students. So although, that line item for safety cameras is one time and it will disappear next year, something else that is a one-time fee will appear in that place. So the need for those one-time items is reoccurring, if you will.
So I totally understand that. But one of the reasons why things that are long-term projects are typically not funded out of this general fund is because of the fact that it can be spent on anything. So really at the whim of the school committee, you could take that $800,000 and spend it on literally anything. And you could be pressured to spend it on different things and based on, like I said, the whims of whoever happens to be, the flavor of the day. And the question is, when you do a debt exclusion override and you say, we need a new boiler, or we need a new roof for the high school, or we need to build a new building, there's an accountability. There's usually a committee that's involved. There's, some reports that are written. And I guess the part I'm really struggling with is you're basically saying we want $800,000 to do the things we were supposed to be doing anyway, number one. And number two, you have this really serious decline in enrollment, which could easily cover all of these things. I mean, we're talking, potentially 15%, in decrease, maybe 20% decrease in enrollment from where we are now. It doesn't seem like you're going to need to increase taxes to pay for all those things. And I guess I just don't understand why this would be, trust us with this money when it hasn't been, you look at the grounds and we have, some schools are beautiful and some are a mess. And, you have a request for another groundskeeper, but we outsource our groundskeeping to the Park and Rec department. So, I guess it just doesn't seem like there's a plan. And I really want to understand at the bare minimum, I'd like you to tell me, what are you going to spend the $800,000 on in year 2 and 3? You don't have to go out 5 years. Just what is it going to be not next fiscal year, but the
Will, from
following
your
year?
time on school committee, that we do not have a budget set for 2 and 3 years out, that each year we are going through and looking at the requests from our building administrators and from our district administrators and looking at and working with the finance committee and the town side of things, which we worked with this year. And this was the advice that they gave us in how to proceed forward with our budget. They took we took some pieces out completely. We took other pieces into question 1 with the town. So all of that will continue forward. And so, I can't tell you what that $800,000 is going to go to exactly next year. I think Sarah Fox just did a fantastic job talking about things that are known needs for the district moving forward. That $800,000 will probably be used to fund, but we will also go back and listen to our administrators as we have done. And they have done this administration has done a fantastic job of cleaning up its books that were in shambles. And so that we can point to budget lines and know where things are going, and that there are no lines that are just kind of being left unspent until the end of the year, when then they're allocated all over the place to whatever needs to be funded. So that is work that has been toiled over for the past few years. And so any kind of insinuation that this is a slush fund or that there's whims of the school committee, we are a duly elected board and elected by the people of Marblehead to do a job and to work with the administration to fund our schools appropriately. And we will continue to do that. David?
Yeah, and I think, Jonathan, once again, with how many years were you on school committee? 11? 12, pardon me. Thought I missed it by a year. 12 years. You certainly have a good comprehensive understanding of the budget process. But, going back 3 years when we brought Bill McAuliffe in here and he started, reorganizing the budget, then Michelle Cresta came on board to make sure we're properly accounting for the funding and monies and allocating them in the proper line items, which really took 2 years. And I think Michelle has really done an excellent job there to make sure things are in the buckets that they need to be, and they're not being transferred from one area to another. But, it was really an opportunity to start out with the baseline and then identify what the needs were. And it started with Bill McAuliffe. And he said, look, we have 5 teachers that are retiring, as someone in the audience said, at the highest step. This is the value of that. If you're going to replace them, what level do they come in at? And there's still even money left over if you're replacing a teacher that doesn't come in at the highest step. So that's the first thing. I mean, we are going to continue. And this is my last year, and I'll be first in line, Jonathan. I've been talking about enrollment for the last 7 years since I've been on school committee, if you haven't noticed. And I'll continue to talk about it. I've continued to be an advocate for monitoring where we're at. And I was a big advocate when the previous administration wanted to build a 99,000 square foot school. And we have an 81,000 square foot school. So I'll be right there when enrollment's declining, asking the questions. The second piece is, special ed. Let's not lose sight of the fact that we do need to provide equal opportunity for everyone in this district. Special ed is a challenge. We had $849,000, I think was the number. $849,000. That was funded through the available tax funding right now. Who knows where that will happen? Jonathan, people can move into Marblehead, people can age out, people can move out, but special ed is an ongoing challenge for us that we're trying to balance with programs that we offer in town, limiting students that go out of district, with the state not responding to the circuit breaker funding. They haven't changed the circuit breaker funding in over 10 years. The responsibility for special ed falls mainly on the shoulders of the local district. So that's the second piece that I just wanted to mention. And, to Sarah's point, the last piece about coming up with a plan to fund repairs to buildings. Marblehead has a long history, at least the 25 years I've been here. There's a budget methodology that we have not built money within our budgets to fund the roof at the garage, a new salt shed, replace the roof at the water and sewer department, replace the roof at the Marblehead Counseling Center. They just have not bought into that methodology of creating reserve funds. Will they in the future? We've started to set up a small reserve fund. The town does have a small reserve fund. We have a special education reserve fund that's at $250,000. We have utility reserve funds. We've tried to make moves along the fringes, and maybe this is an opportunity for us to start looking at what we need to do when it comes to funding capital. But buy a new fire truck. We don't put $20,000 away or $100,000 away for 9 years and then buy a new fire truck in the 9th year. We do it through debt exclusion. That's a decision that the future people of Marblehead will have to make. But getting back to that, $800,000 question, Sarah answered it very well. We have capital needs that will be addressed. I think the school committee needs to be held accountable for how that money is going to be spent in the future. And people should ask, where is that money going next year? And if it's not there to be spent, I think Sarah Gold told the finance committee, well, then we won't spend the money. We've turned back money to the town for the last 2 years. And I think in the 7 years I've been on the school committee, we've never done that. So we turned money back to the town the last 2 years. If the money, what's that?
Can I
during the pandemic, I guess you could say that, but yeah, during the pandemic when we had extraordinary additional charges that were borne upon us, right? That was a real challenge. So we'll continue to do that. And, if the money doesn't need to be spent, hold the school committee accountable, Jonathan. You're
Thank you.
absolutely right.
Dave, I appreciate your response. And I'll drop off. I just want to have a quick last comment and then I'll drop off. I would like you guys to commit before Election Day to scan the budget book and post it online. It's not a lot to ask. It's 300 pages. You have a high-speed scanner at the superintendent's office. Please scan it and post it as a PDF. This is not a technological hurdle. You're asking for $3 million. Could you please post the budget book? That's it. Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks, Jonathan.
Did you want to come up and ask another question?
I think it would be helpful if you had a clear plan, sorry, I don't know if you can hear me. There was a clear plan of what you're going to spend $880,000 on this year.
Yep.
I know you're not going to know 5 years or 10 years down the line, but in the following fiscal year, wouldn't we have already decided what we're going to spend that capital improvement on, or we have not even decided what we're going to spend that money on? Because that was designed as a one-time capital improvement. The rest of the money was for personal, the additional personnel. $500,000 is going directly to the benefits, and then of course, the kindergarten. I think the fundamental question I'm trying to get the answer to is $808,000 literally next year. Like we are with Sarah said, we have an extensive building plan project. We have all these improvements. Where's that money going to go to the following year? I'm not asking 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, but at least fiscal year 2.
So the way our budget process works is this year we started in December. Usually we start more January. But our administrators have been working on it before then, and then they come to the school committee to present all of their asks. The asks for this year were larger than what we actually ended up asking for. Right. And so through the process of working with the school committee, working with the town, working with the finance committee, those asks are looked at again to make sure that they're actually necessary, see what can be funded through current budgets, and then if there's additional asks, what do we do with those? Do we table them? Do we ask the taxpayers for them? So yes, we know that we've got a lot of facilities needs. We will can anticipate that technology needs will continue to be there. We've talked about, we know that we need a social studies curriculum within the district. I'm sure Dr. Bucky, I'll turn over to him in a moment, can give you a few other things that he knows are coming down the pike.
But wouldn't it be great just if you had a slide for year 2 and said, this is where the $808,000 is going to next year?
If I may, Sarah. So part of the problem is there's every year or 2 to the 3 years, there's 2 seats open. There's 2 seats open. So our current committee cannot tell you what the will of a future committee would be. We can tell you the discussions we've currently had about future priorities we would like to have, the social studies curriculums run several $100,000 usually. We talked about more inclusion and special education. We talked about social emotional curriculums. There were different things we talked about, but it would, again, in the spirit of transparency, it would be unfair for any of us to guarantee the vote of future committees when we don't have that makeup. We can't, it's not like we're saying this is how we would vote as individuals. I may not have a seat later on. Someone else may be here. I can't tell you how a future committee is going to vote, and that would be wrong. As the current flavor of the day, as Jonathan called us, and I take that in good humor, don't worry. I can tell you I pulled up very briefly our facilities assessment, which is also online. There's 165 line items. So I'm literally just grabbing a few here and there from particular fiscal years. The recommendation for next year was to replace the elevators at the Veterans School, the 3-story hydraulic, which their estimation was a little over 300,000. So that just shows you out of 165 line items, that's one. So do we know that will be prioritized by a future committee? We can't in any fidelity guarantee you that. What I can tell you is there are clear things that we've talked about. We talked about in public meetings, things that we want to make priorities as a committee of 5 that we are now, but we can't tell you what a future committee will do or not do. I can tell you though, and I think Jonathan knows this, is that a unique position the school committee is in and has always been in, according to Mass General Law, is we have what's called line item autonomy, not on one-time fees, on all of our budget. So at any given time, any school committee in the Commonwealth can move line items as they choose to, not just one-time items. So the idea that we would suddenly start doing that when we haven't done that, in the time I've been on, in the 3 years I've been on, I come and speak to that. um, it is unlikely, I would say. Because even if you pull out that 800,000, we still by Mass General Law can vote to move line items in a public meeting, and there's nothing precluding us from doing that. So I'm just saying, if that's the stop point, that whether it's one time or reoccurring, has no factor in Mass General Law whatsoever.
Thank you for the clarification, sir.
Megan, I see you've got your hand up. Did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I just want to follow on from that to make sure, just to clarify, I guess, because what we've done a lot of work to make a more robust planning process, and Michelle Crest, I think, has done a really great job along with Bill putting that in place, and that's what we followed for the past 3 years, where it takes into account, Sarah, like you said, the administrators, but also the community feedback. So all that remains in place, but we have the planning for success. That is our 5-year roadmap. So that itemizes the initiatives that as a community we determined were priorities. So for me, Sarah's right, like every committee, is different, but that is kind of the strategic plan that is in place right now that itemizes, where we're headed for the next 5 years. That's the starting point, that we will come back to for the budget planning process, as well as that facilities plan, which maps out what we need to do year by year. So that's the starting point. That's what we plan to do. That's our, roadmap for the next few years.
Anything to add, Dr. Bucky?
No, I think you guys have addressed it, that, committees get the input from the leadership team, and we've identified social studies as a driver for future budgets. And so what we bring before the committee, they prioritize what they will support. And we work with the finance committee, and it's collaborative, and my favorite word, iterative, because it changes from November to April.
And I think, just to kind of finish this piece of the conversation, this committee, and again, as Sarah said, we can only speak for this committee takes the fiscal responsibility very, very seriously. And I have to think that future committees will too. It's very evident that Marblehead voters are very intent on understanding what is in the asks of the budget. And, a few years back, and I've said this quite a few times, we knew we needed money, but I couldn't tell you where we needed it. And so I couldn't vote to ask for that money. Now I can tell you where this is going. And I've got one more year on this committee. And so, I will be here next year. And so I absolutely promise that I expect this committee to be able to tell you next year where that money is going. That we've worked very, very hard to make sure that is how we operate. And I absolutely have a commitment to that moving forward. Sterling Smith, you've got your hand up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello, I'm sorry, I'm not a Zoom person. I apologize, I can't get my camera to work.
No worries.
I live in Arlington, but I have 3 grandchildren. I know I have a young voice that are going through the Metro program, and they're considering strongly coming to Marblehead. And I love Marblehead. It's a beautiful town. The people are wonderful. I was concerned about, wait a minute, hold on, please bear with me. I'm not a technical person. Someone said that they're saying that the DEI position is a need. And I'm hearing mixed messages about the DEI position, and my kids are people of color. I just wanted to find out if, here, I have a question. Wait a minute, where is it? 2 questions. One, if the DEI director isn't hired, is that going to adversely affect anything that my grandchildren might be? I didn't think so either. Thank you for shaking your head, James. I can see you. I just can't figure out how to work my camera. And also, is that you said there's a need? Is Marblehead, should I be concerned about my grandchildren going to Marblehead if there's some, I don't understand. Do you understand?
I think I understand your question, or your questions. So this committee has determined that working with the administration, that the DEI director is a need for our district. And so that is why it is an ask within the larger budget ask. And so when Dr. Bucky spoke to that position earlier, he kind of laid out what that person would be addressing and what their, portions of their job description would be. And so, yes, we have determined that this is a need for the Marblehead Public Schools. To reference back to some of the things that Dr. Bucky was talking about as support for why we need this, we have had an unfortunate amount of incidents this year. I think we're at about 11 of anti-Semitic graffiti in our bathrooms at various schools, of homophobic and transphobic statements and graffiti. We've had racist things go on and classist things go on. So this is it is a need. My children go to the Marblehead Public Schools. My husband is Jewish, and I feel that they are very safe in these schools. And I feel like there's work that we can do to make all kids feel welcome. The first time that I went to the Mass School Committee Association, their big conference last November. And one of the classes that I chose to take was on diversity, equity, inclusion. And they had the superintendent and his chair from Blackburn Regional School District. And they started to talk about the work that district had been doing with DEI. And they talked about, they were looking at MCAS scores at one point, and I guess when they have their younger students, they recognize students throughout the grade levels with exemplary scores. Their younger students, they had a really good mix of girls and boys. When they got to high school, they noticed that their boys were no longer performing well. And it seems to be a pretty similar demographic out there as Marblehead is. And so they used their lens with DEI to look at what's happening with our boys. Why are they trailing off and not achieving, at least on the MCAS, as well as what they were when they were younger kids? And so, this is this all means all piece that, it isn't just about, race and ethnicity. It isn't, there's a huge special education component to it of helping our teachers understand exactly what it means for our students who need support services and how their IEPs translate straight into classroom supports and helping those students, at every level. And that those supports then, and the help within the classroom and the teacher understanding better how to, teach material in many different ways is going to benefit every student in that class as well. So the DEI piece to this is very diffuse, and it isn't, simply just about incidents of hate, although we've heard our principal at the village school say that when she's been handling these racist graffiti pieces, that she would really have appreciated the guidance of someone who specializes in responding correctly and supporting students as well as families correctly. So it's a big one. And so that is why it has a dedicated place in this budget ask.
Well, can I have as a follow-up is, so within say my grandkids are supposed to be starting in September 20, what year are we in? So in a year or so, if you get this position filled, is there going to be some sort of metric that you can gauge the level of or decrease in incidences incidences? Sorry.
We'll be hopeful to address the incidents that hopefully will lessen. But all of our administrators, Dr. Bucky has worked with his administration to roll out more comprehensive evaluation processes for every staff member in the district. So all of our administrators, this director included, would be setting goals and working with Dr. Bucky to make those into SMART goals, to put them into actionable goals, and then to follow up to see how they met those goals and how successful they were. So they would be held to the same standard that any of our other administrators and staff is held to.
Okay, all right, I'm convinced.
Right.
Can I add one thing?
Absolutely.
So the DEI director, it's not a new idea in the district. We've been working for the past 2 years, since John has come on, to really strengthen that area in the school and bring it up. We're not where we should be, like what John said, but to do something. And so the DEI committee has been working really hard but it's all volunteer teachers and faculty, and they just can't do it all themselves. So we need someone who can take over and guide us and guide the district in that. But we are doing stuff and we're doing great stuff, and we just want to continue it to a level of where it should be. So I just wanted to make sure everyone knows that it's happening, and we just want it to be the best it can.
Well, does that mean that the school board is going to be diversified somewhat as well, considering I'm not seeing a lot of color over there?
That would be wonderful. I mean, we don't get to pick who runs for school committee.
Oh, so you're trying to encourage other more diverse.
We would welcome diversity on our board.
What was that last part? I didn't hear that.
We would welcome diversity on our board.
Excellent. Good to hear. All right. I'm convinced. Thank you.
Thank you, Sterling. Any questions in the audience at this point? All right. I will go to James Full.
Hey, good evening. I got like 1,000 questions. I'll try to parse it down to one or two. Most of you guys on the board probably already know who I am and probably know what I support and don't support. I just want to ask just one time for in unison, the school board to answer A, if this override doesn't pass, can we operate at the level we are right now? Yes or no?
Yes, I believe that's what Dr. Bucky has told us. Yes.
The town has level service our budget.
Yes, the town has level serviced our budget. Our special education needs for next year were covered by the town, which was a huge thing for us because that would have made things very different if this did not pass. But yes.
Okay, perfect. So my next question is, would the town, under question 1, which I'm sure is going to pass because we all want good roads, the town is going to assume, I believe, $8.9 million worth of infrastructure for the schools, whether it's technology and roofs. So my next question is, between the roofs and the boilers and everything else, is the MSBA involved in that process? Yes or no?
Yes, we have. David, do you want to take that question? Is the MSBA involved in that process?
I can. So the MSBA has an accelerated repair program that we are getting in line with. And there's no guarantees with MSBA programs, but we will look to be applying to that program. And hopefully there'll be some consideration for reimbursement. It should be noted that with the additional requests for funds that are coming from all of the 351 communities in Massachusetts, there's less money to go around. And with the cost of increased construction, we've recently heard that they're actually raising some of their requirements to 25 years. So if you have an accelerated repair project, the school needs to be at least 25 years or older, but that hasn't been fully decided yet. But with all that information that we have, we are going to look to get a reimbursement from the MSBA on the high school roof.
Okay, so that leads into my next question. If the MSBA is going to reimburse and the town is picking up the tab for the roofs under the capital improvement, question 1, who gets the money back? Does the town get it or do you get it?
It would just be money that's not spent. The way town of Marblehead does bonded projects, for instance, so take the Brown School. The money doesn't go out and be bonded until it's actually spent. Previously, they used to bond it, and then if there was money left over, it would need to come back to the town. But in this situation, till the money's actually spent, they would get some bond anticipation notes in advance. But until the money's spent, they wouldn't go out and bond it. So the Brown School, for instance, came in $1.5 million under budget. There's not $1.5 million to give back to the town. We'll just never have debt service on that $1.5 million.
So the roof and the boilers, just to clarify, are a debt exclusion. not operational override, not Prop 2.5.
Exactly, they're debt exclusion. It's not a general override. So that leads me into my next question. There's been talk about picking up the tab for sports programs and everything else with all this money under the school department's general override. Is that still a standing thing? Because for the last 100 years, parents have been forced to pay for sports equipment, bus rides, field trips, everything else. Now, I did hear somebody on this school board say that, oh, well, this is kind of a gimme. We kind of want this too. Where do we stand on that? Because you're asking the taxpayers, and 50% of the taxpayers in this town do not have children in school. I do, but 50% of the taxpayers in town do not. Is it fair under a general override to ask the taxpayers to fund something like that?
That's a good question. Thanks for that. That was my idea, I guess, if you could say someone has to take ownership. It was a consideration, and I think it was just a overall general discussion that in addition to the expenses that we have student activity fees for drama, for the chess club, for debate team, and for every sports team. And those are above and beyond what you would consider people pay in their taxes. And so I had asked the question, let's look at what the fees are in other towns. We've rebalanced that fee structure in the last couple of years. And it was something that I thought maybe we could consider to, not burden parents with the additional monies, as you say, to pay for cleats, to pay for equipment, but it never really came up for further discussion after that, James.
It's not a part of the budget
Not
ask.
part of the budget.
Okay, perfect. So that leads me into my next question. The median income in this town is what, $800,000 plus? Yes, I mean, literally.
I don't know what the median income is.
Okay, so you're asking the taxpayers again, and I represent the taxpayers that are just trying to get by and stay in town, and you're asking for a permanent override of $3 million. And it's been said over and over again, there's like no clear direction on where the money is going to go and where it's going to go in 3 years when the next school board rolls in or rolls out. Yeah, I don't understand how you want this override, and then you're going to turn around and saddle the town with almost $9 million of repairs to the school, and you want to throw loose ideas about textbooks. So this is my next question. Every single year in the school budget, there's a line item somewhere buried in there, and I've looked at the last 5 years. Textbooks, Social Security curriculum, everything else. So why is it all of a sudden a big pressing need that we need to replace textbooks that haven't been updated since 9/11? That's a serious question. If every year there's money in the school budget, which the school department's budget is over 50% of the town's budget, why haven't those textbooks been updated? Why is it all of a sudden a selling point or a crisis point that those textbooks haven't been updated since whoever graduated in 19 whatever?
So I'm not completely clear on your question, but the lines each.
I'm going to try to.
The lines each year, there are lines for maintenance, repairs, and if those textbooks, a few don't make it, we have to replace them. If we have more students in a class, we need more books. So those are lines per building that the principals are in charge of maintaining. They go to a lot of things. The request would be for a completely new set of updated books. We're not using the books from that I used when I was in high school or that David used, or, so these books get replaced fully at some points. So is that responding? Am I on the right path?
So Sarah, my question is, again, as a taxpayer, every year there's a line item for textbook maintenance, whatever you want to call it. why haven't those textbooks at the high school level been updated since 9/11? Because it's a huge portion every year of your budget. And this is the questions that every taxpayer in Marblehead is asking, whether they have students in school or not. And these are questions you guys really should be able to answer. I want to know why. Why haven't they been updated?
I will say that most of our operating budget goes to salaries. So that
Well, I know that.
Of the town budget, but we also have over 500 employees that feed into that. So most of that budget goes into salaries, and I'm going to dish to Dr. Bucky to speak more about the actual boots on the ground.
Sure. I couldn't agree with you more. I ask that same question regularly as superintendent of schools. How is it that we have a textbook that has not been replaced in 20 years? Who has been minding the store? Where Sarah Fox spoke to line item autonomy. What did former administrations do with that textbook line item if we weren't maintaining and updating our textbooks? So I think your question is fair. I just don't have the answer for where did that money go. We met with the policy subcommittee yesterday, 2 librarians that have been in the district for over a decade asking for something came to the policy subcommittee and said, we were ignored, or this was not a priority. This is a priority for us that we have a textbook that is not 20 years old. That's why it's part of this ask.
Okay, well, that's a huge question that a big portion of the people in this town are asking. Why hasn't that been done? Why isn't it updated? And I could go on all night, but guys, you're pushing for a general override on stuff that should have been taken care of in a $50+ million budget for the last 20 years. So you got to help everybody out and be like, what happened to the money?
Can I explain? So up until 2 years ago, almost every year around October, there's a hard freeze put on our budget. And at that point, you can no longer buy paper. You can no longer buy toner cartridges, ink cartridges. PTOs were approached to buy papers to print worksheets for students. And that was continually happening.
Parents are too, Sarah. Parents are asked every day to bring in paper towels and everything else.
I totally hear you, but I just want to try to give you my understanding and the answer to the question. So a lot of this is driven through what we started to see several years ago was a sharp increase in our out of district placements, which is an unfunded mandate. These are our students. We need to educate them. We should be educating them. And we're legally obligated to pay for the out of district placements when a legal agreement is come to. So we saw a very sharp increase. So all of a sudden we have our fixed budget with our fixed our staffing numbers and personnel, and a very small portion of our budget is discretionary, which is our expenses, paper and things like that. If you can call it discretionary, that you could go a year without textbooks or without paper or without whatever, but for budgeting purposes, that's discretionary. So each year when more out of district placements come in, there was nowhere to go to because we're legally required to do that. And we don't have those numbers quite often until after the fiscal year has been set. So year after year after year, it's been death by 1,000 cuts. So when we get one additional out of district placement, sometimes they can be 300,000 with an additional $70,000 for transportation of one student. So that money has to come from somewhere. So we start cutting our line items. That year, we had planned to buy this textbook, or we had planned to buy this science manipulative, or this or that. But when push comes to shove, we're legally obligated to pay to educate that student. So where we were never going for that Prop 2.5 along the way, as our out of district placements kept growing and growing and growing and growing, we just kept carving out our budget. And this is really where the last few years, the rubber has hit the road, where we have cut so deeply that there's nowhere left to cut. And now we need to start rehabbing our budget and get back to where our our staff can function, where we aren't freezing budgets, where we can buy things like textbooks. I don't think at any given time there was a single school committee or a single educator or a single superintendent that started the year and said, you know what, I'm not going to buy those textbooks. I'm not going to buy that paper. But when you have to educate a child who requires a different way of education that we just simply cannot provide, there are only legally there are only so many places you can go to that for that money. So what we're doing now is we're trying to make ourselves whole again, and by ourselves I mean our students' education. And our hope is that once we get our base up, that we can maintain within that base. And so when we get these surprise out of district placements, we're not cutting things like that. I hope that answers your question.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Sarah, because I actually support you. Okay. So out of district tuition, it's what, $3 million this year? There's another 89 whatever for collaborative out of district tuition, right?
I don't know that.
I'm opening it for the number right now.
That's a lot of, my point is that's a lot of out of district tuition.
It is.
What is so fundamentally wrong with our school department and the way it's budgeted that we can't handle some of that special education on our own?
We're always looking to keep our students in district. That is the goal. That is the best thing for every student in Marblehead. And there are points when we cannot, we are looking at how to create additional programs that would keep our students in-house. And this is not just a Marblehead problem. This is a problem that districts across the Commonwealth are facing, and trying to figure out creative ways to keep their students in for the good of their students, as well as for the good of their budget. Our director of student services always trying to figure out how to better support students and working with her staff. But it's, it is a continuing problem, and one that, probably is not going away.
Okay, it is a continuing problem. And I'm going to say this, and then I think I'm just going to stop for the night, because I think you're set in your ways and you think what you're doing is proper. Special education. When the vice principal, Michelle Carlson of Marblehead High School, sits in a parent-teacher conference with my own son and tells my 16-year-old kid, who wasn't even 16 at the time, her best advice was, you know what? You can drop out of school when you turn 16. What kind of special ed program is that? Seriously. $3 million a year, and nobody offered anything to me as a taxpayer. And I've got another child in school that's probably going to end up at Marblehead High School if I can't get her into Essex Aggie or somewhere else. And you can see where my concern is. $3 million a year, and the best advice we got was, you can drop out at 16. How many times has that happened at the high school? Answer me that, please, and then I'll just stop.
Well, I can't, and none of the school committee can answer that question. That, we were not in that. That's an operational piece, and that's. I'm sorry that happened, and we can't.
Hey, you know what? It happened, Sarah. Maybe the superintendent could look into that, and maybe the superintendent could do something about the educational leadership that's $700,000 a year and everything else. And I am not the only parent in town, and I'm not the only taxpayer in town that has multiple concerns about this override and how the school department is run. I'll yield. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to remind everybody as we go through that it's very important that we not name staff or students or anybody else by name. I've been on the receiving end of that. It's not, there is a time and a place and a channel, and I don't think that was your intention, James. I'm not saying it was, but I just want to make sure that we be careful as we go through. But also, as we talk about our out of district placement students, they're people's kids, they're students. they listen to this stuff. I just want to make sure that we're aware of this.
Jen Schaffner?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. I actually had a couple clarification questions that came up since before my regular questions. So the first one was to Sarah Gould. You had mentioned attending the MASC event last fall, and you talked about a school district that had some programs that were interesting around DEI, but you referred, I couldn't hear it. Was it the Blackburn district? I don't recognize the name of it.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Dr. Bucky just corrected me. It's Blackstone Millville.
Oh yeah, Blackstone, yeah, got it. Okay, just wanted to look at that. Okay, second clarifications for David Harris. Mr. Full was talking about the MSBA repair projects and how that works. And I guess my question is, I don't know if you know this, is if the repair projects typical of the building projects where they're reimbursement programs, in which case, if that's true, we would have to fund our full bond issue, then get reimbursed. And then I'm assuming that those funds would go back to the town general fund.
No, so good question. So along the way with the Brown School project, to your point, as we expended money and the invoices were paid by the town with bond anticipation notes, then that would get approved and submitted with about a 90-day lag to the MSBA. We've been receiving reimbursements from the MSBA throughout the project. And right now we're at the 95% point where they put a hold on the last 5% reimbursement until the final audit is completed and all the monies have been expended for the project. So it's sort of like a rolling reimbursement, Jen, you're right. We are paying the bills. Yes. And then the money comes in from the MSBA, but then Marblehead goes out and bonds what's left based on.
We're still issuing bond anticipation notes, so we are still incurring costs. I just want to make sure that's clear, that it is a reimbursement.
Right, but we in the case of the Brown School where we received about $14 million, we didn't go out and spend $55 million. And we have $14 million sitting in reimbursement. We just didn't go out and bond based on the reimbursement that we get from the MSBA. That's the amount that actually went out and was bonded.
I understand, but you do it in the notes. So there is a small incremental cost. I just wanted to, and there is a cost to the bond anticipation notes, and that's all built in.
Okay. Right? Yep. Good point.
So my next question was really my main question. So I still am trying to understand, and this question was asked earlier, is why the school committee is not looking to use cost saves from declining enrollment to fund these facilities costs. And I guess I don't have a clear answer on that. And so I guess I'd like to direct this to Dr. Bucky. And that is, we have you had a very clear facilities assessment done and a very clear, I think Sarah mentioned, I don't know if it's a 20-year, but at least a 5-year facilities plan in pretty intricate detail on how to maintain and improve, capitally improve these buildings. Is there a similar 5-year plan for staffing, given the declining enrollment that we've experienced and we're going to see over the next 4 to 5 years? I mean, I looked at the presentation materials earlier today to refresh my memory from the budget hearing, and the single document that outlined the major points of the budget this year had one line item for staff at $36 million. That was a line item for payroll, which was last year's payroll plus contractual increases. So it didn't appear there are any changes to staff anticipated. So again, my question is, do you have a 5-year plan or for whatever year plan for staffing?
We do. It's part of the planning for success and looking at our staffing each year as we do our budget plan.
So is that available? Can we, so in other words, that would be projecting out as you have declining enrollment, what your staffing needs would be over the next 5 years?
That's done in budget planning each year with the building principals. That's one of the first questions that Michelle and I ask. Are any anticipated retirements? And if so, what would you fund if there is retirement savings to be had? And do you anticipate decline in enrollment? What will your enrollment be and how will your staffing be impacted by that?
So, okay, so I'm trying to understand. So this year's staffing line item is identical to last year's plus contractual increases. So I guess, again, this goes back to the question is, with declining enrollment, what are the anticipated cost saves from that?
Or this year or next year?
Well, I would argue, yeah, 2 years ago to last year to this year to what, over the next 4 years, we're going to have approximately another, several hundred less students.
To the best of my knowledge, we haven't reached a point across the district at this point where we are in need of cutting a classroom that isn't then kind of replaced at a different school. So we've been able to retain our staff. We haven't let go of, maybe there's been one or two at the high school level.
In kindergarten, I think.
But that was also retirement.
Yeah, a couple of years ago when kindergarten wasn't replaced. And some teachers at that level, I think, right? As far as that goes. So I think what Jen's saying is, is we could identify the total number of teachers, which was only 2 about 4 or 5 weeks ago, but apparently a couple more numbers have come in. And I think you can appreciate this, Jen, having been on the committee with having over 400 people. It's pretty fluid. One of the most fluid pieces of the budget is, somebody goes out on leave and they're accruing salary because the long-term substitute doesn't cost as much as the teacher. And, so in the course of human resources, when you're managing budgets, there's a lot in that. There's a lot in that 36 million. And you saw that in the years that you were on the committee. And it's incumbent upon the superintendent to manage those variances. And I think since Bill McAuliffe has come on board, we've balanced the budgets, turned money back to the town and prepaid special education. So I think that will continue as we see variances, for instance, across, we didn't spend our substitute money. Well, this district didn't go out and burn the substitute money. It's going to be returned to the town, or it's going to be, used to prepay special education. And I think that'll be the same thing if there's unanticipated retirements. I don't think you're going to see this committee or this administration just trying to burn the money and bury it.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. I'll leave it at this. I'm not talking about unanticipated.
That was a different time, and that was like 4 years ago, and I don't think that's going to be happening.
And I'll end it at this. I'm not talking about unintended or unanticipated retirement. I'm talking about forward planning for a significant decline in enrollment.
Okay. No, I would second that. I think the NASDAQ, one thing I can say in addition to that, we had let our enrollment lapse with NASDAQ, which was not only do they provide enrollment information and research across the state of Massachusetts, but they helped us with the search for Dr. Bucky. They were the consultant that we used and engaged, but we had not used their information to get enrollment studies and projections up until a couple of years ago. We renewed our subscription as a result of the search. We had 2 free years, I think, of being a new enrolled member. And so this was the first year I've seen the full reports from NASDAQ. They're robust, they're public, they're available. I encourage people to look at them. And we have had a lot of discussions about, planning going forward and how do we look at what cost savings could be anticipated, as well as a 3rd grade class. I think one of the members of the audience said there was 147 students in one class, but I think we know if you have 250 teachers sort of follow that class, and eventually they will age out, or, we'll have too many teachers based on class size. So I think that's one of the things I would agree is that's come out of this forum. It's a real opportunity to keep a close eye on enrollment and what Marblehead wants to have as class sizes. Not to belabor this, but I've heard a lot of discussions in town that, well, it's great that we have, if class sizes are decreasing, that's better for us. I'd prefer to have class sizes of 15 or 17. So I think that's going to be a discussion, Jen, that this district needs to continue to review. What's the policy? What do we want the guidelines to be for class size going forward as enrollment continues to decline? It's a really good point.
I also think it's more complicated than just saying that teachers are retiring and we gain that money back, because it's not like a high school teacher can be shipped to a kindergarten classroom. It's like grade based and almost school based on what's happening within that school. If a teacher leaves, you still need all those teachers at the high school because that enrollment is the same right now for the next few years. So I think it's not something that we can just come up with right now that we have all this extra money because we have retiring teachers over the next few years. So I think it's a very complicated process that we look through every year when we do the budget and go through it and come up with a solution. So it's not as simple as just retiring and getting all this money.
And I think, it's fair to say that before tonight, we were aware that this is coming up. Dr. Bucky is aware that this is a piece that will be addressed in future budgets. So this is not new.
It's good.
Yeah. Pierre, can you please state your correct name and address for the record? Okay, Luba Shapiro.
Yes, hi, Luba Shapiro, 27 Ware Lane, Marblehead. Yes, I have a question. I have it written down, just a second, sorry. Can you please name any other academically comparable community to Marblehead that has successfully moved to a full inclusion model you have proposed for Marblehead? Can you lay out and detail the inclusion model for the district, the staffing needed by class or grade or subject? Thank you.
That's not in our current ask. That is an idea that has been discussed as a possible future for Marblehead. But, I think just even within your question, that is an incredibly gigantic undertaking and would need a lot of planning and a lot of teacher education and buy-in. And so that would be something that would take years to put forward to the community of Marblehead. So that's not what we're asking for within question 2.
Thank you.
Thank you. Karen?
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, so my question is, Marblehead is moving to an inclusive model that requires adding more adults to every classroom. Can you please tell us how many adults are in each classroom on average right now and how many you anticipate that increasing to on average? Is this where you plan to spend the savings from future attrition that would otherwise free up funds as enrollment declines?
This seems like kind of the same question as last time. We don't have current plans to put additional teachers in every classroom. The needs of a classroom and support or aids are change and fluctuate with with the student that is in the classroom, with students that are in the classroom. So, and some of our grades, like 5th and 6th grade, have kind of 2 classrooms with 2 teachers combined into teams. So I don't, go ahead, Dr. Bucky.
And I see Sarah has her hand up as well, but I think that there was some frustration during the budget hearings and process that we weren't actually doing that this year, that wasn't part of this year's ask for us to add staff. And I know Dr. Donnelly, the Director of Special Education, on a number of occasions responding to public comment, that she was not asking for additional staff, but was confident that existing staff could perhaps be better allocated or reallocated in terms of what we have in the FY23 ask without requesting additional personnel.
Sarah, did you want to weigh in?
I think I'm guessing now at what people are trying to get at. This has been a question that has been circling in the community recently about what is some people are referring to as leveling. What it really is what we are trying to implement is as an MTSS model. And I'm wondering if that is what these questions are concerning when they keep talking about inclusion, where the goal of MTSS, you in one classroom will be able to teach children of all different educational levels at the level where they're at. I'm wondering if this is what these questions are regarding, and if the question is, will we be adding staff to do that? Because many districts that do MTSS, what they do is they lower their student to teacher ratio to be able to hit those all the students where they're at. Very similar to how we had the one model classroom per grade level at Bell, the supported classroom. I'm wondering if that is what people are asking, but if that is, to clarify, we're not doing this. We're not lowering our student to teacher ratio. We're not developing a full inclusive model with this budget. There will be no fully supported classrooms at all grade level. If that is what you're asking, and I apologize if that's not, but that's what I was guessing you guys were getting at.
And we're also not de-leveling classes. That's not a part of this budget.
No, I know. I use that word because it's a word that's been floating around. And so I couldn't tell if that's what people were getting at, but I just took a leap. If someone could clarify if that was the question you were asking.
Karen, have we spoken to your question?
Yeah, I just understood in the budget that they were going to be adding some more aides and administrative staff. So I was just asking about, how that affected the actual classroom with
some of those administrative staff would directly work with classroom teachers, like the curriculum directors. They perform a function of helping teachers and supporting teachers deliver their curriculum effectively and appropriately. But again, as I mentioned when we sort of started at the curriculum piece, we are not asking for additional classroom teachers next year. These are all positions that have either at one point been in this district and then through level funded budgets had to be taken out, or in the case with the DEI director, that we are adding some additional support staff. There's also a human resources generalist to support our human resource director that we share with the town.
Assistant principal.
Another technology specialist. There's an assistant principal that will be shared between the Glover and the Brown School.
I guess I'm just wondering, with the declining enrollment, where all these additional staff members are going to go, because it would seem that you would need less staff if you have less students.
So we would need to be looking, as our enrollment continues to decline throughout coming years. That would be where we'd be looking at our classroom, the needs within of classrooms. How many classrooms are at each grade level? What classroom, what our ratio for teacher to students would be, and sort of what the district ideal and policy would be on that. And that's sort of where the retirements come in hopes that our retirements match the speed of our declining enrollment, so that we're not, we work very hard because we never want to see or have to let teachers go, because they are our biggest asset in this district.
Right, but you would still have all of this additional administrative staff.
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. I just want clarification.
Joe L.
Hi there, Joelle Leiden. I'm on 43 Cedar Street in Marblehead, obviously. In terms of the kindergarten and the need or ask for the full day to be funded by the taxpayer, can you confirm the academic day or clarify the academic day for kindergarten? Is there any academic learning that goes on after lunch?
So Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a while since I've had a kindergartner, but when I had a kindergartner, it was stated that until noon, they would cover new material, that would be there where the new curriculum would be brought forth. And then after noon, when a handful of kids would leave, then it would be review after that until the 2:30-ish dismissal. So, I don't know how they would end up running that. My assumption and hope as a school committee member would be that they could get through even more and maybe spend longer on topics. Again, I'm not a classroom teacher, so I don't want to kind of wade too deeply into that. But that it would open up more flexibility within their day of having to get in all the new curriculum in the morning and give them an entire school day to move things forward.
Okay.
So I want to be really clear when I answer this question. I am answering this question as a mom in my experience of having a kindergartner now and a kindergartner every other year. Not as a school committee member, because as a school committee member, in fairness to everyone sitting up there, it is not our role, nor should we ever be involved in that granular level of what's going on in each classroom. But as a mom, I can tell you what they do. For instance, they may introduce the concept of, in kindergarten, right when you begin, like counting, what is 3 plus 2, how do we add numbers? And so they go over the concept in the morning, and then in the afternoon, they really will dig in deeper. They'll get out manipulatives, they'll have centers, they'll do things like that. I will say, as a mom, I don't know, and all of my kids are at completely different levels and places as far as the way they learn and where they are on things. I don't really know that I would have felt confident that my children would have had what they needed to move on. It's really astounding what kids are expected to have going into kindergarten. They're supposed to be reading fully. And again, as a mom, like, this is what I'm saying. They need to be reading. They need to be doing things that we all did in first grade. So it's just, it's really crazy what they're doing. So I think that, yes, we have ways to apply if you don't have the funds or whatever. But I will say, in a town like Marblehead, a lot of people who really do need that money are hesitant, because it's a tough town to be in that position. And I know that, the schools don't discriminate against that, but I think that to level the playing field, the full day really is needed. And I'm a big advocate in public education. If you need something, then we need to pay for it. And I think that's why most towns have moved to making it free all day kindergarten. I don't know that it answered you. I'm sorry if it didn't.
No, thank you very much. So I just think that, if you're asking the taxpayer to fund a full day of kindergarten, that it should be a full day of learning, and not, I think traditionally, as Sarah said, traditionally it is either a review or, they go to lunch and then recess and then art or gym or, something that is not traditional academic learning.
So I will say it's definitely not like a lunch bunch type of thing, if that's what you would think of it as. I'm that crazy person that really can't wait for summer to come, can't wait to have my kids home with me. I'm really excited for them to be done. If that's what it was, I wouldn't send them. I love having them home with me. I would keep them home. I really worry on the days that I have picked them up early that they are actually missing something, because it is meaningful. Yep. It is a circular review, but it is very meaningful time. It's not just choice time and play with Legos or whatever. It is meaningful learning.
Okay, that's good to know. My other question too, in terms of the DEI position, has it been considered to share that position with, say, Swampscott? We share a lot with them, sports and other things, wrestling, I know. Has it been talked about to share the DEI position with a neighboring town?
That conversation did happen, and it's the feeling of the administration, and it's supported by school committee, that it would be best for us to have our own DEI director.
Okay, do you know why decided?
We think the needs of the district are such that it could support a full-time person.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'll look for more detail, but I'll do some research. I won't keep everybody.
All right. Thank you. Okay, I don't have any other hands up on the Zoom, and I'm assuming our wonderful participants in the audience are sated with their questions. All right. So we will say thank you to everybody for joining us this evening. These were great questions. We appreciate the ability to answer these questions for people because we obviously know that they're out there. And we are hosting one more of these, I believe, on Monday evening. Was that the 13th? Right here at 7 p.m. as well as on Zoom. And that also is a posted meeting, so that can be accessed. We'll do our best to get it out on the channels that we got it out on today as well, but it is on the public meeting calendar on the town website too.
And
So
I can make one final comment. I would just encourage people that have specific questions or want more information that my door is always open and that I'm happy to sit down and talk through. If people aren't comfortable speaking in public at our public forum or felt like there was lack of clarity on something tonight, to come directly to me. And I'm happy to answer questions.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.